Welcome to Module 5. Thank you for joining us for the next module in the Kentucky PSEL Guidance for Growth and Evaluation Professional Learning Series. It is recommended that you complete all of the modules in sequential order. Thus, if you have not watched modules 1, 2, 3, and 4, please access those modules on the Principal Partnership Project Google site before continuing. The preceding 4 modules will provide the necessary overview and knowledge needed to engage in the meaningful learning and application that is intended in Module 5, Alignment to the Performance Measures. The goal of this module is to explore the connection of the 10 Kentucky Professional Standards for Educational Leaders to the 4 performance measures of planning, environment, instruction, and professionalism in order to support growth and inform evaluation. In order to allow for review of critical inclusions and forms in your district certified evaluation plan, there are identified times during this session that you will pause and engage in district discussions and planning. Please note the icon that designates when to pause the module. Please have the following readily accessible before you start the module: your certified evaluation plan, a copy of the Professional Standards for Educational Leaders, and the electronic version of the questions for Module 5. Timing and grouping for allocated discussions is at your discretion. Additionally, during this collaborative learning session, you may choose to utilize some of the other professional resources for this module. Just like with the other modules, the slide deck, a script, a resource list, and the other materials are available for your use. Go to the Principal Partnership Project Google site and click on PSEL modules, then scroll down to Module 5. Also on the site, you will find lots of other resources, all of the modules, related support materials for each of the modules, a copy of the National Professional Standards for Educational Leaders, as well as the digital version of the Kentucky PSEL Guidance for Growth and Evaluation tool. This tool can be downloaded or copied for your use. We will, of course, be using this tool more as we work through this module. Every student in our Commonwealth deserves to attend an effective school led by a highly effective school leader. The purpose of any evaluation system is to provide feedback that results in growth. For school leaders to grow and become more effective, they must understand the expectations that are outlined in the new standards, reflect on where they are in regards to these standards, receive timely feedback around the standards, and their evaluation must be focused on the school leader's efforts to improve as a result of that feedback. This must be done in an open, honest, and fair way that is easily understood. In the previous modules, we learned about the National Professional Standards for Educational Leaders that we will use in Kentucky, as well as how these were used to develop the Kentucky PSEL Guidance for Growth and Evaluation tool. Thus, we have a clearer understanding of the expectations for today's accomplished school leader. In this module, we will continue our learning by analyzing the connection of those professional standards to the 4 required performance measures we use for evaluation. Those measures are planning, environment, instruction, and professionalism. Before we look at the alignment to the measures, it's important for us to remember a few things. The Kentucky Framework for Personnel Evaluation, our statewide evaluation framework, requires districts to develop a local evaluation system through a certified evaluation plan called the CEP. The CEP must outline the procedures and include the forms for the evaluation of all certified school personnel below the level of superintendent. An evaluation committee consisting of an equal number of teachers and administrators must develop these procedures and forms for the CEP. The CEP must be approved by the local school board and approved by the Kentucky Department of Education. If any changes are made to the CEP, it must be approved by the local board and KDE. As we learned in Module 1, the Kentucky Board of Education updated 704 KAR 3:370 to require that the National Professional Standards for Educational Leaders, PSEL, be used as the performance criteria to determine the areas, skills, and outcomes on which school leaders are evaluated. This means that every district in the state had to update their CEP to reflect this change and submit it to KDE for approval. As stated in 704 KAR 3:370, the performance criteria, which is now PSEL, the identified district-approved sources of evidence, and the professional judgment of the evaluator would concertedly be used to help evaluate and help school leaders grow. A performance rating of exemplary, accomplished, developing, or ineffective shall be given by the evaluator for each of the 4 performance measures of planning, environment, instruction, and professionalism. Then a summative rating, or overall rating, shall be assigned to all certified school personnel, which includes principals and assistant principals. It is also important to know that the district certified evaluation plan shall establish uniform requirements for the length, frequency, and nature of observations or site visits conducted by an evaluator for the purpose of evaluation. The district certified evaluation plan shall require a conference between the evaluator and the evaluatee within 5 working days following each observation or site visit. Furthermore, the evaluation criteria and the process used to evaluate certified school personnel, including school leaders, shall be discussed with the evaluatees no later than the end of the evaluatee's first 30 calendar days of reporting for employment each school year. For principals and assistant principals, this most likely means by August 1st each year. Thus far, we've mentioned the district CEP numerous times. You will be asked momentarily to stop the video and engage in some discussions to ensure that you are more familiar with your district CEP. To guide your discussion, please use the following questions to facilitate a focused and purposeful look into your CEP. When was your district CEP updated, approved by the local board, and approved by KDE to reflect the adoption of PSEL? What sources of evidence are listed in the CEP to be collected for school leaders? If observations or site visits are district-approved sources of evidence, what is the length and frequency of these? How are pre- and post-observations, as well as pre- and post-site visits handled in the district? How is the required evaluation orientation handled, and when does this usually occur? What forms are required to be used to evaluate and help school leaders grow? Remember, these questions are available in an electronic format as a Google Doc that can be accessed through the available resources for Module 5. At this time, pause the video, and when you're finished, you may resume the module. While we have reviewed most of the basic requirements that must be outlined in every district certified evaluation plan, there are some other important provisions we need to remember as well. For example, the district shall include evaluator certification and observation training in their certified evaluation plan, and all evaluators shall be trained, tested, and approved. Consequently, all new school leaders must attend a 2-day, 12-hour initial certified evaluation training and be tested. This training is provided by the Kentucky Department of Education. All experienced school leaders must receive a minimum of 6 hours annually of Personnel Evaluation System training approved by the Effective Instructional Leadership Act, and this can be conducted by the district, a regional cooperative, or it can be also provided by KDE. For further information on any of these, please visit the Principal Partnership Project Google site. While we frequently use the words domain and standard in our conversations about evaluations, it's important not to confuse either of these words with the performance measures that are required in regulation. The framework for teaching, along with the framework for other professionals, establishes the criteria for evaluation using domains. We could call these standards. The criteria for school leaders is established through 10 professional standards for educational leaders. Just like the domain for teachers and other professionals, all 10 principal standards do not have to be rated. However, During the summative evaluation, each certified school personnel shall receive a rating on each of the 4 required performance measures of planning, environment, instruction, and professionalism. Again, the evaluator shall use sources of evidence in combination with professional judgment to inform the rating on each of the 4 performance measures. We have mentioned the district CEP so much because most of what must occur during the evaluation of a school leader is outlined in your CEP and is at district discretion. Let's engage in some more discussions to ensure that you are familiar with your CEP. To guide your discussion, please use the following questions to facilitate a focused and purposeful look into your CEP. How does your CEP address required training of evaluators, observers? Does your district require any training beyond the 2-day, 12-hour initial training for new administrators? How does your district handle the 6-hour update training for experienced evaluators? How does your CEP ensure that the words domain and standard and measure are not confused? Is a professional growth plan a required source of evidence for school leaders? If so, how is this facilitated by the CEP? Are there important timelines and/or dates that are established in your CEP? If so, what are these? Again, these questions are on your electronic resource document you used earlier. At this time, pause the video. When you are finished, you may resume the module. As you were examining your CEP, you probably came across the crosswalk shown on the slide. If this crosswalk is in your CEP, please reference it at this time. Whether it's in your CEP or not, though, most of us are familiar with this crosswalk because it shows how the 4 domains for teachers and other professionals align to the 4 performance measures. This alignment is easy, some say common sense, because the names of the domains or the standards parallel the names of each of the 4 performance measures. For example, Domain 1 for teachers and other professionals is called planning and preparation, and this aligns directly to Measure 1, planning. Domain 2 for teachers, classroom environment, aligns to Measure 2, environment. Domain 3 for other professionals is called delivery of service, and this aligns to Measure 3, instruction. And Domain 4 for teachers and other professionals is called professional responsibilities, and this logically aligns with Measure 4, professionalism. Therefore, the crosswalk shows the alignment of the domain's standards for teachers and other professionals to the 4 required performance measures. In this same crosswalk, an alignment was made between the 6 old standards for school leaders and the 4 performance measures. With the old standards gone, we need to replace that part of the crosswalk by aligning the 10 professional standards for educational leaders to the 4 performance measures that are required to be used in Kentucky. Let's begin with Standard 1 of the Professional Standards for Educational Leaders. Standard 1 is titled Mission, Vision, and Core Values, and it states that effective educational leaders develop, advocate, and enact a shared mission, vision, and core values of high-quality education and academic success and well-being of each student. As we analyze this standard, which of the 4 performance measures of planning, environment, instruction, and professionalism does this most closely align? An argument could be made for any of the 4 measures. Looking more closely at the elements that make up this standard, though, as well as the critical attributes and possible examples contained in the Kentucky PSEL Guidance for Growth and Evaluation tool, can give us the information we need to best determine an alignment. Let's look at each of these elements. Element A says that an effective school leader develops an educational mission for the school to promote the academic success and well-being of each student. Think about what action the school leader is taking. Notice the word develops. Which of the 4 measures would this action on behalf of the school leader most closely align? Surely the most logical alignment is Measure 1, planning. Let's look at element B. In collaboration with members of the school and community and using relevant data, the school leader develops and promotes a vision for the school on the successful learning and development of each child and on instructional and organizational practices that promote such success. Again, think about the action being taken by the school leader. What is the school leader doing in this element? Note the important words develops and promotes, as well as noting that this is done in collaboration with the school and community. Which performance measure does the actions being described in this element most closely align? To develop something requires planning. To have collaboration requires planning for that collaboration. And to intentionally promote something also requires planning. Once again, it is very logical to see that this element aligns with measure 1, planning. What about the next element, element C? The school leader articulates, advocates, and cultivates core values that defines the school's culture and stress the imperative of child-centered education, high expectations and student support, equity, inclusiveness, and social justice, openness, caring and trust, and continuous school improvement. What is the school leader doing in this element that helps to further define Standard 1? This time, the school leader is articulating, advocating, and cultivating core values. We might argue that this is a professional responsibility of the school leader and argue that this aligns to measure 4, professionalism. We might say that this is critical to the environment of the school and argue this aligns to measure 2, environment. However, to articulate, advocate, and cultivate takes planning so that this is done intentionally by the school leader. Once again, this element most closely aligns with measure 1, planning. To save time, let's skip to element E, which states the school leader reviews the school's mission and vision and adjusts them to changing expectations and opportunities for the school and changing needs and situations of students. In this element that further clarifies Standard 1, what does the school leader need to do? This time, the school leader reviews the school's mission and vision and adjusts them as things change for the school and students. Again, some kind of argument could be made for each of the measures. However, to review something takes intentional planning, and to adjust something also takes planning. Therefore, this element most closely aligns to measure 1, planning. Let's move on to Standard 2, ethics and professional norms. Standard 2 states that effective educational leaders act ethically and according to professional norms to promote each student's academic success and well-being. We will follow the same thought process as we did in analyzing each element in Standard 1. However, this time you will get the opportunity to determine the alignment. We will get you started with element A, and then you will pause the video when prompted and work through the remaining elements in Standard 2, ethics and professional norms, to determine which measure this standard most closely aligns. Element A states that the school leader acts ethically and professionally in personal conduct, relationships with others, decision-making, stewardship of the school's resources, and all aspects of school leadership. What does an effective school leader do in this element? The school leader acts, and with further analysis, we realize they are acting ethically and professionally. As we think about what an effective school leader is actually doing in this element, and as we also contemplate the 4 performance measures, this element most closely aligns with measure 4, professionalism. Now it's your turn. Please follow the process we have established for analyzing each element in Standard 1 and do this with Standard 2, ethics and professional norms. You may choose to work together as a whole group, or you may jigsaw the elements and assign them to individuals or smaller groups. Regardless of your chosen path, though, At the end, decide as a group whether Standard 2, Ethics and Professional Norms, most closely aligns to Measure 1, Planning, Measure 2, Environment, Measure 3, Instruction, or Measure 4, Professionalism. At this time, pause the video, and when you are finished, you may resume the module. If we revisit our crosswalk from earlier, you will remember that we aligned Standard 1, Mission, Vision, and Core Values, with Measure 1, Planning. After an in-depth analysis of Standard 2, Ethics and Professional Norms, it would seem that the most logical alignment for this professional standard would be to Performance Measure 4, Professionalism. At this time, it is also important to recognize that the alignment of the standards to the measures is not set in regulation, nor is it set by KDE. The alignment is somewhat subjective, and arguments could be made for each standard to possibly align in some way to any of the 4 performance measures. However, following the process we have been using to analyze what the school leader is doing should allow for consensus and create an alignment that we can all agree upon. Although in the end, remember, the alignment of the standards to the required performance measures is a district decision. Now it's your turn to continue working. Once again, follow the process we have established for analyzing the actions of the school leader. You will work through the remaining elements of the remaining standards to determine which performance measure each standard most closely aligns. Just like before, you may choose to work together as a whole group, one element and one standard at a time, or you may jigsaw the remaining elements and/or standards and assign them to individuals or smaller groups. Regardless of your chosen path, though, at the end, decide as a group the alignment of all 10 standards to each of the 4 performance measures of planning, environment, instruction, and professionalism. At this time, pause the video, and when you are finished, you may resume the module. Again, the alignment of the 10 professional standards for educational leaders to the performance measures of planning, environment, instruction, and professionalism that are required for evaluation is a district decision. The Commissioner's Principal Advisory Council, PRAC, as well as numerous other groups involved in the development of the Kentucky PSEL Guidance for Growth and Evaluation tool, were asked as a part of their work with PSEL to align our new professional standards to the required performance measures. On the slide is what was generated by these groups. The group decided that Standard 1, Mission, Vision, and Core Values, Standard 9, Operations and Management, and Standard 10, School Improvement, most closely aligned to Measure 1, Planning. They decided that Standard 3, Equity and Cultural Responsiveness, as well as Standard 7, Professional Community for Teachers and Staff, aligned to Measure 2, Environment. Standard 4, Curriculum, Instruction, and Assessment, Standard 5, Community of Care and Support for Students, and Standard 6, Professional Capacity of School Personnel, were aligned to Measure 3, Instruction. Finally, they aligned Standard 2, Ethics and Professional Norms, and Standard 8, Meaningful Engagements of Families and Community, to Measure 4, Professionalism. How did your district decide to align the standards? When you pause the video, compare the alignment you created as a working group to the possible alignment shared in this module. Most importantly, though, look at your CEP at what your district chose as their alignment. Use the questions on the slide to facilitate your discussions, and remember, these questions are available as an electronic resource for you. At this time, pause the video. When you're finished, you may resume the module. A nicer version of the sample alignment that was shared earlier in the crosswalk is available in the introduction pages of the Kentucky PSEL Guidance for Growth and Evaluation tool. From any tab in the digital tool, you can click Print Intro to access this simple sample alignment. Again, the alignment is a district decision, and the sample we have shown you is not the only alignment that is being followed by districts in our state. For example, here is another alignment that is being used by one of our districts. Notice the difference in this example is that Standard 5, Community of Care and Support for Students, has been aligned to Measure 2, Environment, instead of Measure 3, Instruction. Now that we have an alignment of our new professional standards to the required performance measures for evaluation, what does it even mean? Well, the evaluation process works very similar to how it did with the previous standards. The evaluator works with the school leader to develop a professional growth plan, a PGP, that establishes areas for focus and growth. The evaluator communicates with and observes the school leader through site visits as outlined in the district certified evaluation plan with an intentional focus on the PGP. Evidence is collected to inform decisions about the standards, conversations occur, feedback is provided, reflection occurs, and then the school leader takes action in order to make progress. We will explore this more in depth in Module 6, Putting It into Practice. This process will be reiterated many times during the school year, with data and evidence being collected, conversations occurring to inform next steps, and reflection promoting new actions. Let's use the Kentucky PSEL Guidance for Growth and Evaluation tool, along with the knowledge we have gleaned during this module, to look at this all in practice. Meet Principal Washington. Principal Washington is in her third year as a principal, and because of societal realities and issues facing her school, community, and nation, has chosen to focus on Standard 3, Equity and Cultural Responsiveness. She worked closely with her superintendent to develop her PGP. Realizing that an entire standard is too big for a goal, she reviewed Standard 3, Equity and Cultural Responsiveness, and chose to focus on the first critical attribute for this year. She wrote one of her PGP goals around the critical attribute, stating, values each student's culture and heritage and acts with moral conscience to understand students and families. This critical attribute that is her focus is directly connected to elements A, G, and H. Let's take a few minutes to look at the critical attribute that Principal Washington selected to focus. Let's look at this critical attribute from Standard 3, Equity and Cultural Responsiveness, and the connected elements. When prompted, please pause the video and use the following questions shown on the slide to facilitate your discussions. What does the progression for this critical attribute look like? What are the differences across the progression for the performance levels for this critical attribute? What do each of the elements A, G, and H related to this critical attribute tell us? What does the progression for the performance levels for each of these three elements tell us about the critical attribute? What are some of the possible examples in the tool that would correlate to this critical attribute? What are other possible examples that we might see or hear in our district that would correlate to this critical attribute? Access Standard 3, Equity and Cultural Responsiveness, through the digital tool, and as a group, review the critical attribute and correlated elements. At this time, pause the video, and when you're finished, you may resume the module. Principal Washington asked her superintendent to provide as much feedback around this area as possible. The superintendent reviewed this standard as well as the critical attribute and related elements that were the focus. The superintendent also noted possible examples of evidence and data that might connect to this focus area. During one of Principal Washington's site visits, the superintendent noted that there were some posters on display in the cafeteria that represented some of the different cultures and backgrounds that are in the school and community. A PLC meeting was being held during another site visit. In this PLC meeting, the superintendent heard Principal Washington say, "It is important for diverse student populations to be represented in clubs and organizations in our school." This was recorded on an electronic observation form. Later in the month, Principal Washington emailed her superintendent to share the results of a latest survey that was administered to parents. During a later conversation, the superintendent asked Principal Washington some questions from the survey. Specifically, the superintendent asked why might only 54% of parents on the survey feel that the literature being integrated into the school curriculum is reflective of the cultural demographics of the school. Let's use the digital tool some more and analyze some of the evidence collected by the superintendent for Principal Washington. Looking at Standard 3, Equity and Cultural Responsiveness, use the tool and your knowledge about this critical attribute to find where these pieces of evidence fit. What preliminary thoughts are you having, or what preliminary ratings are you seeing based on the limited data gathered for Principal Washington? At this time, pause the video, and when you are finished, you may resume the module. As the year progressed, more site visits occurred, as well as conversations, reflections, and further actions in regards to achieving the goals established in Principal Washington's PGP. Of the 4 required performance measures, you'll remember that one of Principal Washington's goals was focused on a critical attribute of Standard 3, which is aligned to Measure 2, Environment. Further data was collected around Standard 3, Equity and Cultural Responsiveness, and data was even collected around Standard 7, Professional Community for Teachers and Staff, which is also a part of Measure 2, Environment. At the end of the year, using the Kentucky PSEL Guidance for Growth and Evaluation tool to drive discussions, the superintendent and principal concurred that Measure 2, Environment, was at the developing level. Using all available data and evidence, as well as previous evaluations, during the summative evaluation meeting, the superintendent and principal decided on ratings for the other measures as well. The remaining performance measures were rated at the developing level. Obviously, with all 4 performance measures rated as developing, an overall summative rating was also made as developing. Of course, during the summative process, lots of data and evidence was used from site visits and various conversations. The PGP was revisited numerous times. In the end of all this, along with the professional judgment of the evaluator, this was used to assign an accurate performance rating of either ineffective, developing, accomplished, or exemplary to each of the 4 performance measures of planning, environment, instruction, and professionalisms. Those ratings were then used to assign an overall summative rating for the school leader. In the case of Principal Washington, the summative rating was easily determined because the ratings on each of the 4 measures were the same. What if the ratings on each measure had not been the same? What if they were different? What if Principal Washington had received a rating of ineffective on one of the measures? What if an exemplary rating had been given on one of the other measures? What would her overall rating have been, and how would this have been determined? When determining the summative rating for certified school personnel, including school leaders, decision rules must be used. It is critical to note the decision rules are a district decision and must be part of the CEP. These decision rules can also be different from district to district. We do have new standards for school leaders, but the measures haven't changed. Since the measures haven't changed, your decision rules will work the same as always because those have most likely not changed either. Let's look at this more closely. You will be asked shortly to stop the video and engage in some more discussions to ensure that you are more familiar with your CEP. To guide your discussion, please use the following questions to facilitate a focused and purposeful look into your CEP. What are the decision rules for your district? Where are they located in your CEP? Which decision rule might be used most frequently? Why? Which decision rules, if any, are rarely used? Why? Are there any decision rules missing? If so, what rule is needed? At this time, pause the video, and when you're finished, you may resume the module. Now let's make sure we understand how to use your district decision rules by doing some practice. When prompted, pause the video and use your decision rules to determine a summative rating for each principal featured on the slide. Be sure to discuss any situations where there is more than one possible summative rating that can be given. When more than one rating is possible, discuss what might be needed to justify either the lower or the higher rating. At this time, pause the video, and when you're finished, you may resume the module. Reflecting on what we've learned in this module, the goal was to explore the connection of the 10 Kentucky Professional Standards for Educational Leaders to the 4 performance measures of planning, environment, instruction, and professionalism in order to support growth and inform evaluation. As we think about moving from 6 principal standards to 10 standards, it's easy to conclude that there is more expected of school leaders, when in reality, PSEL just more accurately captures what a school leader must do in today's times to be highly effective. It is also worth mentioning that different leaders will be focused on different standards depending on where they are in their career. There is nothing in regulation that requires that a school leader be rated on each of the 10 PSEL, but they must receive a rating on each of the 4 performance measures of planning, environment, instruction, and professionalism, and they must receive a summative rating. It is paramount for school leaders and superintendents to know the new professional standards and to understand the alignment of the 10 standards to the 4 performance measures that are required for evaluation. It is also important to know the procedures, forms, and requirements outlined in your district certified evaluation plan. In our next module, we will put all of this together and look at the entire process more in depth. In closing, thank you for participating in Module 5. If you have additional questions, feel free to reach out to any KD employee listed on this slide. Also, for specific questions about the Certified Evaluation Plan, please have your district CEP representative contact Todd Davis at todd.davis@education.ky.gov or call 502-564-5846.